morning, everybody. My name is Keith Roman. I'm the president of Public Interest Investigations, a Los Angeles-based firm. Our firm, we're the lead investigators for the attorneys on this litigation, and my staff has exhaustively interviewed dozens of survivors of military rape and sexual assault. I'm here today as a representative of the legal team to announce the filing of this lawsuit on behalf of these survivors and to raise awareness of the pervasiveness of military rape and sexual assault, and to let, and last but not least, the survivors' voices be heard. Most of you should have received a copy of the lawsuit when you arrived. If you haven't, please see Erin Powers, who is now over there. The lawsuit was filed this morning in Federal District Court in the Eastern District of Virginia. The cause number is CACV. I'm sorry, you know what? 151. Oh, 11. I'm sorry, 11. So it's CACV 11-151. The news conference participants will include myself, Eleanor Smeal, President of the Feminist Majority, and Anu Bhagwati of the Service Women's Action Network. I'm joined on the podium by three of the survivors, Sarah Albertson, Corey Choka, and Mila Hyder. And as well, we're joined here by other survivors, Panyata Berzikis, Jessica Kenyon, Gary Noling, who is the father of Carrie Goodwin, and Regina Vasquez. And also in attendance is Susan Burke, lead attorney for the plaintiffs, and lead attorney for the survivors. So Ms. Smeal and Ms. Bhagwati and I are going to each make some brief opening remarks, and then we're going to open the floor to questions for the survivors. They won't be making any opening statements, but will be available for questions. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence here with us today in support of this work of Terry O'Neill, the president of the National Organization of Women. Thank you for her presence. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge the courage of these women and men are trauma survivors, and the courage that it takes for them to come forward and speak about their experiences is something that I find personally inspiring, but it's not easy and not difficult. So having said that, we ask that you in the press respect their dignity as you pose your questions today. Details of their stories, the specifics of their stories, are spelled out in excruciating detail in the complaint that was filed, and we're not going to ask them to retell those stories here today. Their purpose in speaking is to reflect upon their feelings, their emotions, and to raise awareness of the prevalence of military rape and sexual assault, and hopefully by speaking out, try to bring about changes in policy and attitudes so that others don't have to suffer in the manner in which they did. When we begin the question and answer part of the conference, please state your name and the news organization you're with. With that said, I want to make a few quick remarks. I talked about the courage of these women and men. The women and men who have been victimized in this way come from every branch of the military. They come from all over the country. They come from every demographic group. What they have in common are three things. First, they sought to serve their country in a time of war. They put their lives on the line for us. Second, that loyalty was repaid in the most terrible of ways, by being victimized in a personal, intimate, and horrific manner. And then finally, after they had been victimized by the criminals who raped them, they were further victimized by the institutions to which they had sworn an oath of allegiance, whether it be the Marines, the Army, the Coast Guard, the Air Force. This is a story that only begins with rape and sexual trauma. It's a story about the failure of one of the most trusted institutions in American life, our military. When the parents of young people agree to send their children off to join the military, they do so with fear and with trepidation of the obvious dangers and risks that job entails. They would never imagine that those risks and dangers include being raped by another soldier or Marine, and then having that crime covered up by the very institution they trusted with their children's lives. And the impact of this trauma goes beyond the individual service members who were sexually assaulted. It impacts the thousands of mothers and fathers and siblings and spouses who were victimized whose loved ones were victimized in this terrible, terrible way. They also have to deal with the wreckage of the lives left behind. And finally, there's just the waste. We pour thousands and thousands of dollars of training and caring for these service people, and then to have their lives destroyed. And now, all the aftercare that is going to be needed. So throughout U.S. history, people have turned to the courts when other institutions in our society have failed to take action for justice. That is what is happening today. The military has conducted study after study. Congress has held hearing after hearing. Yet, based on the Department of Defense's own statistics, the problem has only gotten worse. Why is today's lawsuit necessary? Because the other institutions of government have failed to deal with this worsening crisis for women and men in the military. We would welcome an effort by Secretary Gates to address this problem immediately and legitimately. This has not happened yet, and that's why we're here today. I think, so what I'd like to do now is to introduce Eleanor Smeal, President of the Feminist Majority Foundation, a national leader of the feminist movement, and an expert on policy and practice and advocacy for the political, economic, and social equality of women.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be standing here to give an historical background, really, of the attempt by the women's movement, countless rape crisis centers, and experts dealing with sexual assault to solve this very serious problem. I'm also standing here in awe of the women and men who have come forth to take this case to court. It takes great courage. They're under danger doing it. But they're doing it not for themselves. They're doing it to change for all time the treatment of women and men in the military, and the treatment in a process that is still not treated seriously, sexual assault, which injures not only the victim, but the institution itself, and injures the families of the people who are involved. There is no winners here. In fact, our society and our culture all are injured by what is happening. We have the women's movement and members of Congress, women members of Congress especially, have pursued this for years. This is really, this court case is necessary because so much else has failed. Military assault in the military is not only in each of the branches, but it's in the military academies themselves. And I was trying to figure out how to put this in perspective, to show the patience and the faith in the system, and now to show that this case is absolutely necessary to break a chain of failure. We, in the women's movement, managed to pass a bill to protect victims of domestic violence. It was a handgun bill, which said that a victim of domestic, a perpetrator of domestic violence, even if you had a misdemeanor, could not get a handgun. And when we did this, we thought it was very, very important because the lethal impact of a handgun in the hands of a violator it's clear, it's obvious. And it was a big fight to get this through Congress, but we managed to do it. And it had an unintended consequence. The unintended consequence was that both law enforcement officers and military who carry guns were also, obviously, some of them were were affected by the law. What we didn't realize, and what I couldn't